I live in a college town, and yesterday I was driving around town and just looking out the window, and I noticed basically 90% of people dressed like absolute trash. And the people who did have some effort put into their style and into their fit, those people still looked bad because they'd been taking fashion advice from fashion influencers who are just seeking attention. So that prompted me to make this video because I think most people are just falling to the lowest standards. You see people wearing all these trash baggy fits. You have the baggy sweatpants, the oversized hoodies, and no one actually looks decent anymore. And I think a lot of it stems from what I'm going to talk about in this video, which is people have gotten out of shape, and clothing and style in general has reflected that shift in our society. For example, take a classic Henley. It looks insanely good on someone who's actually in shape, who has a good V-taper, who's able to fill out the sleeves. But then you put that same shirt on someone who's 300 pounds overweight, and it looks horrible. It looks disgusting. You never want to see a fat person in a Henley. So it reflects that a lot of this fashion, a lot of the trends that are happening these days are people just putting a band-aid over a bigger problem, which is 90% of Americans are just out of shape. No one has a good enough physique to be able to look good in clothing, and as a byproduct, the standards for apparel and for how you dress, they've dropped so low that everyone is just looking like trash. Everyone looks like they're from the hood. And my take on it is that you have to improve both. I think you can do a lot even if you're not in the best shape and you're working towards something. I think they both go hand in hand. I think you should be working on your physique and trying to build towards something, while at the same time I think you can fix a lot of it just by cleaning up your style, figuring out, okay, where am I at right now with my physique, and what can I do intentionally to make sure I look presentable and not like garbage. And something that got me thinking about this was I have a friend, really close friend, and he's a real estate agent. So because of his work, he shows up with a collared shirt everywhere he goes. His standard for dressing is just higher because of the nature of his work. And we hang out all the time, and there have been situations where I have a much worse fit and I'm standing next to him and I feel the gap. I feel like I'm underdressed, and I just kind of feel a little like uncomfortable because my friend is just looking way better than me. And I think that's an important concept, because if you can set the standard and actually start dressing better, the people around you feel that and they start dressing better as a byproduct. So instead of falling to the standards of the lowest person, instead you start setting the standard, and as a byproduct, people start dressing better because they don't want to feel that gap, that uncomfortable feeling of them knowing they look worse when they're around you. It also made me realize that dressing well is a choice. It really doesn't cost anything else to wear collared shirts everywhere. It doesn't cost anything else to actually dress well. And that was something that in my mind, it was, subconsciously I thought, yeah, it's cheaper to wear a t-shirt rather than a button down. But in reality, it costs basically the same. If you're going to like Ross or Marshall's, you can dress well for the same price that it costs you to dress trashy. And I think there's two types of men. There's the people who put attention into their style and how they dress for the sake of attention. And you have the other men who dress well and dress professional for the sake of respecting themselves and being respected, not in a flashy way, not in a way to get attention, more so just to be a professional, just as a man, not looking trashy. And I think a lot of the fashion advice that's out there is just optimized for attention, and that's why you get a lot of these fashion people pushing weird fits that just look weird and like it doesn't make any sense. It's because these people are just trying to get attention, and attention shouldn't be your goal. So when you dress professional, it doesn't mean wearing a suit everywhere. It doesn't mean like dressing corporate. It just means putting effort into your style. And by doing that, there's this unspoken respect, not from boys who are just trying to, fit in and look cool. You actually start getting respect from yourself, but also men who are actually worth respecting. And you start holding this frame that people can feel. So it's not about like trying to get attention. It's really just dressing like a professional so you feel confident, but also have that respect from yourself and from other men in your circles. So if you're watching this and you're wondering, what do I actually need to do to my wardrobe to start actually improving? Well, the first step is just being aware of it. I think just by being aware of how you're dressing and the fact that most people are falling to the standards of the lowest person, that is already going to take you pretty far. But two things I would say that kind of just, I think if you can just change these two things, you'll already start looking better. Number one would be swapping out the Nike sneakers for boots. I think boots are just like masculine. They give you a little bit more height. And I think it's just like you feel just more like a man when you're wearing boots. I think sneakers are just boyish and childish. So I would cut out sneakers, replace them with boots. And the other thing I would say is for your top, make sure it just has a collar. It can be a polo, it can be a button down, it can be a quarter zip, something with a collar. I think that should just be the standard. And then it just becomes a game of tweaking the small things that make a big difference. For example, do your socks match the rest of your outfit? Do your pants match your shoes? Do they work together? Do the colors work with each other rather than against each other? Very small things like that, and you'll just start slowly dialing in each fit, and over a few months you'll start seeing massive progress. But once you knock out the 80%, then it's just a game of tweaking the 20% to make sure you have a dialed in fit. And remember, when you're putting together your wardrobe, it doesn't generally cost anything else to dress better. So just think, go on Pinterest or go online and look at how you want to dress, find other men who have a good style and start to mimic that and find your own style in the process. But I think it just being aware of it and aiming to raise your standard is going to be the first step. And that's honestly about all it takes to dress better than 90% of men in this world. And I've been the best dressed man in the room, and I've also been the worst dressed man in the room. And I can tell you confidently that when you have a good fit, when you look like a professional, you have that confidence, and also you get respect from other men, which I do think is important. On the flip side, when you have a horrible fit, you start feeling uncomfortable and you just have zero confidence. So again, the goal is not to dress for attention. It's really just to look like a professional, feel confident, and not be dressing like a boy. Start dressing like a man. I think your wardrobe should reflect that. And it just shows maturity rather than, again, trying to dress like everybody else. So aim to be the best dressed man in the room. Again, this doesn't mean wearing a suit everywhere. It just means reading the room, figuring out like what the social setting is, and not falling to the standards of everyone else, just dressing a little bit nicer. Again, I think wearing a collared shirt everywhere, you're not going to go wrong with that. Like I could wear this almost anywhere and it's not going to look bad. You can always dress it down. So hopefully you found this helpful. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.